In the dead of night, the silence of the novitiate quarters is broken by a voice that shouldn't exist. It's a layered sound, a deep, grating growl overlapping with the distinct, muffled weeping of a child. Both sounds emerge from Maria, whose hands twist into angles that human bones shouldn't allow before her head snaps forward. Maria arrived at St. Mary's Sacred Heart Church only weeks earlier. The building is a fortress of stone arches and quiet devotion, intended as a training ground for young nuns. But Maria brought no religious fervor with her. She was 22, detached, and carrying a heaviness that most of the girls mistook for simple sadness. A fellow novitiate named Ruma was the first to notice the cracks. During evening prayers, while the others recited scripture, Maria stood in the back row, locked in a rigid, forced posture. She wasn't praying. She was rapidly muttering disjointed, bizarre syllables in a language Ruma didn't recognize. The other girls assumed Maria was struggling with the isolation of church life. In reality, the entity was steadily hollowing out her mind, replacing her personality with something else. The situation turned violent when Mother Superior Agnes attempted to intervene. Carrying a silver crucifix, Agnes stepped into Maria's room to offer a blessing. The moment the light hit the cross, Maria pounced. She cleared the length of the room in one movement and tackled the Mother Superior. Maria pinned the older woman down and tore a strip of flesh from Agnes's hand. The screams brought Father Steve running. He arrived to find the Mother Superior bleeding, and Maria crouched in the corner like a cornered beast, forcing him to use a vial of holy water to drive her back. The holy water offered no spiritual relief. Instead, it reacted like industrial acid. Where the drops landed, her skin erupted into black blisters, forcing a scream of agony from her throat that sounded like 3 people shouting at once. The prayers and the crucifix had no effect. The clergy were facing a threat that ignored the rules of their theology, leaving them with no functional way to control the girl or the force inside her. On Friday night, the church brought in a specialist, Father Edmund. He prepared the room for a traditional rite, binding Maria to a wooden chair, surrounding her with crosses, and lighting dozens of candles. He intended to force the demon out through sheer spiritual endurance. As Edmund began the Latin incantations, the physical environment of the room collapsed. Maria's eyes flooded with pitch black. A surge of kinetic energy splintered the floorboards outward from her chair, and every candle in the room extinguished at the same moment. Then the entity changed its target. In the far corner of the room, Mother Agnes suddenly stiffened. Her eyes turned black, her head lolled back, and the demon began speaking through her throat, while Maria sat silently in her bonds. This was a calculated strike. The entity had seized the church's highest-ranking officer, turning her into a tool for a public confession. It wasn't interested in Maria anymore. It wanted to talk about what Agnes had done. Through the Mother Superior's voice, a year of secrets began to unravel. Maria hadn't come to the church out of a calling. She had been hiding a romance with the young Father Neil, a relationship that resulted in a pregnancy the church leadership refused to acknowledge. This diagram illustrates the sequence leading to the cover-up. Every step closer to discovery increased the threat to Father Neil's standing. To the church leadership, the pregnancy wasn't a life to be protected. It was a hazard that had to be removed to save their reputation. During a massive storm, Neil and Agnes cornered Maria in the vacant wing of the church. They used unverified medications to force Maria into premature labor, hoping to handle the problem before any outsiders noticed her condition. The child was born alive, but it never left the room. Neil and Agnes murdered the newborn seconds after its first breath. They carried the body into the cemetery and buried it in a secret, unmarked hole, telling a traumatized Maria that her baby had been stillborn. Maria spent her subsequent nights in that graveyard, screaming into the dirt. That prolonged isolation over her child's secret grave provided the opening for the vengeful spirit to take hold. The entity in the room was a manifestation of that grief. The church leaders had created their own monster through a series of desperate, violent choices. The entity returned its focus to Maria's body, snapping her arm backward with enough force to shatter the bone. The resulting scream filled the entire church, drawing a terrified Father Neil into the room. As soon as Neil entered the circle, the room's gravity reversed. Both he and Mother Agnes were lifted into the air, suspended several feet above the floorboards, while Father Edmund watched, frozen. The unlit candles around the room suddenly ignited. The flames leaped upward, catching the robes of the two suspended leaders. They began to burn in midair, while Father Edmund's prayers went completely unanswered. Maria looked up at the burning figures, a wide smile stretching across her face. In the layered, dual voice of the demon and the child, she spoke the final verdict: one sin, one punishment. Father Edmund stood over his ritual circle, clutching a silver cross while the room burned. He had come to save a soul, but he was standing in the middle of a death sentence he couldn't stop. Neil and Agnes died before they hit the ground. Maria collapsed as the entity left her, her body physically broken but finally silent. She was eventually moved to a hospital, though she would never fully recover from the physical toll of the possession. The Sacred Heart Society moved quickly to suppress the story. St. Mary's Church was permanently boarded up and abandoned, leaving the charred remains of the leadership inside a building that was now a monument to their own crimes. Father Edmund left the priesthood shortly after. Having witnessed the origin of the entity, he could no longer reconcile his faith with the violence hidden behind the church's doors. The tragedy at Sacred Heart points to a specific kind of darkness. It suggests that the most enduring evils are often built by hand, manufactured from the hidden crimes of the people we are told to trust.